This happened 3 nights ago. I've been a nurse for almost 10 years. Night shifts at the local hospital help pay for my mom's medical bills. The hospital is old. It has long, quiet corridors and buzzing fluorescent lights. That night felt colder than usual. It felt quieter, too. I've never stopped thinking about it. As I walked through the empty halls, it was just me and my thoughts. I was tired and ready to finish my shift. The children's ward was silent. I kept hearing faint footsteps echo from the hallway outside. I thought it was the janitors at first, but something felt off. Then suddenly the footsteps stopped. My heart raced. I took a deep breath and pushed it aside. Over the next few nights, things got stranger. I was in an empty room checking charts when I caught a whiff of antiseptic. The smell was strong, like someone had just cleaned obsessively. I looked around, but no one was there. I thought maybe my mind was just tired, but it didn't sit right with me. I shook my head and moved on. Then came the laughter. I was at the nurse's station, trying to stay focused, when I heard it. Soft giggles came from the children's area. It made me freeze. I got up and walked towards the sound, but when I reached the playroom, it was empty. Not a single child was there. I stood in the doorway, feeling cold, as a chill ran down my spine. It was just my imagination, I told myself. Maybe I needed more coffee. My colleagues brushed me off. They laughed, saying night shifts can make anyone jumpy. But I felt more alone each passing hour. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced I was being watched. One night, I was filling out paperwork when I heard someone whisper my name. Mark. It was clear as day. I looked around again, feeling the sweat collect on my back. There was nothing. I held tight to my pen. Maybe I was losing it. Finally, on what felt like my longest night ever, I saw a shadow flicker across the wall. It was just in the corner of my eye. I turned, but nothing was there. My heart raced. I took a breath and stepped into the hallway, hoping to see someone. Instead, the lights flickered, and I felt a cold breath at my neck. I spun around, but only silence greeted me. I wish I could tuck it all away, but it lingers. I thought the hospital was a safe place, but those encounters haunt me. I still work the night shifts, still surrounded by the sterile smell and dim light, but I can't shake the feeling that something isn't right. Then I heard it again, the soft whisper calling my name. I turned slowly, ice creeping up my spine. Mark. The whisper was closer now, almost behind me. I could feel the cold air swirl around me, and every instinct screamed to run. Instead, I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no one, just the sterile smell of antiseptic and the flickering lights above. It felt wrong to be there, alone in the darkness, but I had a job to do. I glanced at the clock. My shift would end in an hour, but it felt like an eternity. I shook my head, determined to push it away. I had to finish my paperwork. I returned to the nurse's station and tried to focus, but the laughter echoed in my mind. Just kids playing, I told myself. Nothing to worry about. Just then, I heard a soft knock. I looked up, and to my surprise, it was Lily, one of the night nurses. She looked pale, her eyes darting around. "Did you hear it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Hear what?" I replied, sensing the fear in her tone. "The whispering. It keeps calling my name," she whispered, her voice barely above a hush. "Mine too," I admitted. "Maybe we're just jumpy from the shift." She shook her head. "No, this is different. I think something's wrong." Her hands were shaking slightly, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Before I could respond, we heard the laughter again. This time it was louder. It echoed down the hallway, and both of us exchanged glances. "That's not normal," I said. "There are no kids here." Lily's eyes widened. "We should check the playroom." I nodded, but dread filled my chest. We walked cautiously toward the children's ward, the sound of our footsteps muffled by the thick hospital carpet. As we reached the playroom, I could see shadows dance under the door. My pulse quickened. We slowly pushed the door open, holding our breath. The room was empty, just as I had left it before. Toys lay scattered, the TV flickering with a cartoon that had been left on. "It must be a prank," I whispered, but doubt laced my thoughts. Then something caught my eye. On the table in the center of the room, there was a small doll. Its head was turned to face us, though I was sure it hadn't been there before. The air around us felt charged, heavy with anticipation. "Did you put that there?" I asked, turning to Lily, who looked just as confused. "No," she said, but before we could speculate further, the door slammed shut behind us. My heart leaped into my throat. I rushed to the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. "Mark, what's happening?" Lily cried. The room was growing colder, and the laughter became a cacophony of giggles, echoing all around us. My mind raced. That's when I realized the doll's eyes were moving. They tracked my every movement. "Get back!" I yelled, shoving Lily away from the table. The lights flickered violently, casting shadows that twisted and turned like living things. I felt a rush of air brush past me, and suddenly everything went dark. Everything. I blinked in the darkness, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My heart raced, pounding against my chest like a warning drum. I reached for Lily, but panic squeezed my throat. "Lily? Are you there?" Silence. The laughter had stopped, but I could still feel the weight of something looming around us. Something cold and unwelcoming. "Lily!" I called again, my voice rising in urgency. Suddenly, a dim light flickered back to life, revealing the playroom in fractured shadows. I strained to see, fighting back the clenching fear in my gut. "Lily?" This time my voice wavered. I heard a soft whimper to my right. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced with dread. I moved closer, the light barely illuminating the features of my colleague's frightened face. "Are you okay?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She nodded, but her eyes were wide, scanning the room as if she expected something sinister to leap out at us. "What happened?" she whispered, her breath visible in the chilly air. "I don't know," I admitted. "I just felt something." As I spoke, I moved to check the door again. It was still locked. "We need to get out of here." When I grabbed the handle once more, trying with all my strength, I could feel the panic rising inside me. My heart raced faster, but I realized no effort was making it budge. "What if we're trapped?" I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Before she could respond, the television flickered again, louder this time, crackling static that mixed with the whispers. I turned back to the doll. It now sat upright, and its smile felt wicked. The bright eyes stared right at me in the dim light. "This isn't funny," I murmured, stepping back. Then I noticed something on the floor. Drawings scattered everywhere. I bent down to pick one up. It was a crayon drawing of two children playing, except their faces were smudged out. I felt a chill run through me as I realized the names scrawled beneath were eerily familiar. Lily and Mark. This can't be real. I felt my throat tighten. "Mark." "Look at this," Lily whispered, pointing to the wall. There, etched into the paint, were lines of tiny handprints, leading toward the corner of the room. They looked almost fresh, as if someone had just been there. I suddenly felt exposed and vulnerable, trapped in some twisted game with no escape. Is someone playing with us?" My voice trembled, and I felt a wave of cold air sweep past. It sent shudders through my body. "There's got to be a way out," Lily said, shaking her head to clear her thoughts. "We have to find it." As I turned back to the door, the shadows in the corner flickered again, crawling like tendrils of smoke. I blinked hard, and then I saw it. A figure, barely visible, standing behind Lily. "Lily, behind you!" I shouted, panic clawing at my voice. She turned just in time as the lights flickered again, illuminating a face that didn't belong there, smiling and grinning, wide-eyed as if it were waiting for something. The air thickened, and I felt it, the unmistakable pull of something ancient and wrong. Then the lights went out again, plunging us into an inky black, and I heard a whisper that chilled me to the bone. "Come play with us." The darkness closed in again, stifling and heavy. My breath hitched as I held onto Lily's hand, forcing myself to stay focused. I could feel the fear radiating off her like heat, and I fought to keep my panic at bay. "What do we do?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. I don't know. "We could try screaming for help," she suggested, trembling. "What if no one comes?" The thought spiraled in my mind. I glanced around, trying to visualize the layout of the room. There had to be a window or some other way out. My heart sank as I remembered how far we were from the nearest exit. Just then, the soft hum of static returned, creeping under my skin. I glanced nervously at the flickering television. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and in the brief moments of illumination, I saw more drawings scattered across the floor. I reached for another one. The colors faded and the edges torn. This one had a stick figure with a huge grin, but its eyes were just dark voids. "I want to leave," Lily whimpered, pulling at my arm. "Me too," I said, trying to sound reassuring. My voice cracked. "Let's find a—" Before I could finish, the lights flickered back on. But this time the room looked different. The shadows seemed to have shifted, darker and more pronounced. I squinted, confusion washing over me. "Did you see that?" I asked, directing my question at Lily. She nodded slowly, her expression mirroring the dread that settled in my chest. Then, as if responding to our fear, the TV blared to life again. But this time, it didn't show static. It revealed images of children playing, their faces singing with joy, until the last frame switched. In an instant, the children were covering their faces, and for an instant, I thought I heard laughter spiraling back into the air. "No, no, no!" I shouted, my instincts kicking in. I reached to turn off the television, but Lily pulled my arm. "Look!" she cried, pointing at the wall. The handprints were moving, smudging like wet paint beneath the flickering lights. I squeezed my eyes shut and then opened them again. Nothing had changed, but the unsettling feeling clawed at my chest like a feral animal. Suddenly a clatter echoed from the corner of the room. It was a toy, a small truck that had rolled away from the others. I stepped closer, every nerve ending recoiling with tension. As I bent down to pick it up, an icy gust swept through the room, wrapping around my ankles and sending chills up my spine. "Mark, get back!" Lily screamed just as I turned to her. I spun, only to find that the shadowy figure was closer now, its grin spreading wider, eyes glinting as if they were alive. This time, it wasn't just standing. It was moving toward us, gliding effortlessly along the floor, leaving no trace behind. A freeing thought pushed through my panic. We had to confront this. "We need to face it, Lily. We have to find a way out," I yelled, forcing my legs to move as I made for the door again. But the handle wouldn't budge. The whisper came again, stronger, as if taunting us. "Come play." The syllables warped in the air, stretching the words into something monstrous. That's when I saw it. The door frame was scratched. Deep marks like claws had raked against the wood, and the final scratch formed a shape, a silhouette. I realized it resembled a child's form, one I had seen before. My stomach twisted, heavy with realization. "We're not alone," I breathed. "We're not alone." Then everything went dark. The darkness enveloped me, smothering and disorienting. I strained to hear anything beyond the pounding of my heart. Panic threatened to take control until a sudden brightness jolted back into existence. The room flickered wildly, and I blinked against the sharp light. Lily was beside me, wide-eyed with fear. "What happened?" she whispered, gripping my hand tighter. I tried to shake off the dread. "I don't know. Just stay close," I replied. I scanned the room again, looking for something, anything, that could help us understand what was going on. But as I looked around, I noticed a figure standing in the corner, just out of reach of the light. I squinted, my breath catching in my throat. It had the outline of a child, but it was too still, too silent. I took a cautious step forward. "Hey," I called. "Are you okay?" My voice wavered, uncertain. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it swayed slightly, leaning toward us. The dim light flickered again, and in that horrible moment, I could see its face. It was twisted, a grotesque version of innocence, with eyes like black holes and a mouth that curled in an unnatural smile. My body instinctively recoiled. Lily gasped beside me. Mark, get away! I turned to her, wanting to run, but something deep inside urged me to stay. It's just a kid, Lily. Maybe they need help. I took another step, fueled by a foolish sense of bravery. As I approached, the figure straightened up, revealing a toy truck clutched tightly in its hands. The same toy that had rolled away earlier. Play, it whispered, the word twisting around the air like a choking vine. No, we don't want to play, I shouted, feeling the weight of its gaze pressing down on me. Behind me, Lily clutched my arm. Mark, we have to get out, now! But the door was still locked. The handle wouldn't budge no matter how hard I twisted it. The room felt smaller as I realized our options were running out. I turned back to the figure, and it stepped forward, its grin widening impossibly. Play, it repeated, louder this time, as shadows began to stretch around it, winding like tendrils around the room. I felt them pull at my legs, dragging at my feet. Stop! I yelled, desperation creeping into my voice. Just let us go! Suddenly the ground shifted beneath me, and the floor cracked open like an old book. Panic surged through me. Lily, hold on! I grabbed her hand, but the shadows were relentless, enveloping us like a thick fog. With one last surge of effort, I pulled her away from the grasping shadows, forcing us back into the remnants of the shining light. What do we do? I shouted, fear cracking through my facade. Lily looked around wildly, then her eyes settled on the flickering TV. The TV! The images! She cried. In the chaos, the television had transformed once more, displaying a replay of the children's faces. But now they were frozen in a different frame. Their hands covered their eyes, and behind them stood the shadowy figure. It's showing us something! But then, the lights flickered again, and the screen turned dark, leaving us in a shroud of despair. Every heartbeat echoed louder, drowning out our voices. I grasped Lily's hand tighter. We need to find out what this is before it gets worse. As we made our way back to the center of the room, the door creaked ominously, and I heard a new sound, a giggle, high-pitched and echoing off the walls. Mark! Lily's voice trembled. I turned to see another shadow forming closer than before. Panic consumed me. Whatever it was, we had to face it, or we'd never escape. And just like that, I realized, we weren't just stuck in the room. We were trapped in a game we never agreed to play. I felt a chill creep up my spine. The new figure was taller, its shape shifting in the dim light. It was almost like it had limbs too long for its body, stretching unnaturally as it stepped forward. Play with us, it whispered, mocking the same plea as the first figure. But this time, I could hear the echoed voices of more children layered in its tone. Lily, I breathed, trying to shove down my own fear. What do we do? Her eyes darted around the room, desperately trying to track every movement. There has to be a way out! She tugged at the door handle again, panic rising. The sound of her effort faded into the background as I focused more on the creeping figure. Do you think it's waiting for us to play? I asked quietly. The shadows seemed to pulse, as if they were alive. I remembered the stories I'd heard. Games with children's spirits often ended in tragedy. Lily shook her head. No, we can't give in to it. We need to find the source of these shadows. I hesitated, but instinctively took a step toward the new figure, hoping to distract it. We just want to help, I shouted, trying to sound confident. But the words barely made it out of my mouth before the creature lunged. Play! It screeched. My heart dropped, and I watched as its mouth opened wider than should have been physically possible, revealing a vacuous void instead of a throat. Panic gripped me, and I dragged Lily backward, away from its reach. No! Don't you dare! I yelled, adrenaline kicking in. The shadows slithered around my ankles, but I pushed harder against them, feeling the warmth of the light surrounding us begin to fade. Lily gripped my hand tighter, drawing strength from our connection. That TV! We have to make contact with it again! She cried, determination flashing in her eyes. Without thinking, we sprinted to the television, the screen flickering to life as we reached it. Images flashed rapidly. Distorted children's laughter swirled through the air, punctuated by chilling cries. I could see the same children from before, their faces now bearing expressions of horror. Then one image froze, the child from the corner with the toy truck. But it looked different now, older, more sinister, as if it had been waiting for us. Mark, look, Lily gasped, pointing at the screen. I squinted and realized words were forming, scrawled across the fuzzy screen. Find the toy. Find the light. What does that mean? I asked, confusion and unease locking around my chest. Just then, a loud crash came from the other side of the room, echoing like thunder. The world seemed to distort with an angry roar, as if the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. I felt panic swell up inside me again. But then, like a lifeline, I remembered the toy truck. It has to be connected. We need to find that truck, I said, urgency pushing every syllable. As I turned to run towards the corner where the first figure had stood, the shadows snarled, swirling relentlessly. No, you can't leave, the taller figure roared, its limbs reaching for us again. Then I saw it, a glimmer of light shining from a crack in the floor near the wall. Lily, I think I see something. Before I could process the danger, I dashed toward it, pulling Lily along. The closer we got, the more the shadows shrieked, seeming to writhe in agony. Just as I reached the crack, a force slammed against my back, sending me tumbling forward into the light. And in that moment, I knew. This was a doorway, but where it led, I couldn't guess. As I dragged Lily with me into the unknown, I felt something shift behind us. Whatever we crossed through, it was going to keep coming for us. And for the first time, I truly understood. I might not come back from this. The world snapped back into focus, and I found myself sprawled on cool, cracked tile. I blinked, disoriented, and quickly pulled Lily to her feet. We were no longer in the dim room, but in a narrow corridor lit by flickering fluorescent lights. The walls were painted a sickly green, and the air smelled musty, like old books and mildew. Where are we? Lily whispered, glancing around. Her voice was shaky, and I could tell she was afraid. I don't know, I admitted, my heart racing. I took a deep breath to steady myself. The shadows still felt close by, as if they were lingering just outside this strange hallway. Then I spotted something at the end of the corridor. A door slightly ajar, the faintest sliver of light seeping through the crack. My instincts screamed at me to avoid it, but that flicker of light was magnetic. It promised safety, or perhaps even an escape. Let's see what's in there, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Lily nodded, though her expression showed doubt. We approached the door cautiously, the wooden frame creaking in protest as I pushed it open. Inside, the room was dark except for a single light bulb swinging from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that danced across the floor. In the center stood a table, and atop it lay a ragged assortment of toys, each one covered in dust and cobwebs. Look, Lily breathed, pointing at a toy truck nestled among the debris. My heart sank. It was the same truck, worn but unmistakable. I walked over, drawn to it, as if it had a life of its own. But as I reached for it, the air around us shifted. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow. Suddenly a chill ran through me. I could hear faint giggles, disembodied and echoing, as if they were coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Mark! Lily cried as the door slammed shut behind us. Panic surged through me. We were trapped. Don't move! I shouted, my voice barely steady. The giggles intensified, layering over each other until I felt overwhelmed. Then, from the darkness emerged a small figure, unmistakably familiar. The child from the television. But this time, he was different. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his mouth stretched into a crooked smile filled with sharp teeth. Play with us, he sang, not in a cheerful tone, but with an underlying menace that twisted my stomach. I took a step back, instinctively grabbing Lily's hand. No, we won't play, I managed to say, though my voice trembled. Stay, the child commanded, and the shadows around us thickened. They crawled along the walls, reaching toward us, determined and hungry. I couldn't think. I had to act. We have to find a way out, I yelled, searching the room for clues. The hanging bulb swung violently, flickering, making the shadows dance even more wildly. Mark, maybe we can use the truck, Lily suggested, her voice cutting through my panic. But would it really help us? Before I could argue, the door shuddered as something slammed against it from the other side. The child's eyes sparkled with dark delight. They want you to play, he hissed. I wouldn't let it win. Lily, grab the truck, I commanded. She reached for it just as the door burst open, revealing the tall, shadowy figure from before. It loomed there, blocking our only escape. Playtime is not over yet, it growled, its voice reverberating through the room. In that moment, I knew we were out of time. I felt the weight of all our fears pushing us down. The giggles and whispers were closing in, drowning out any faint hope I had. Then, everything went dark. The darkness surrounded us like a heavy blanket. I could barely breathe, the air thick with fear. Then, a soft glow returned, illuminating the room. My heart skipped a beat as I realized we weren't alone. Mark? Lily's voice trembled beside me. I clutched her hand tighter, drawn to the eerie light. It was coming from the children's toys scattered hopelessly on the table. Each toy now seemed to pulse, as if they had a heartbeat of their own. Suddenly, the child appeared again, closer this time. His grin had transformed into something more sinister. Time to play, he repeated, but his voice sounded deeper now, filled with a twisted excitement. Why won't you just leave us alone? I shouted, my voice cracking. He giggled, a sound that echoed in the hollow space. You're no fun if you fight. I glanced around the room, searching for anything that could break the spell. The shadows flickered strangely, as if something more was lurking just out of sight. Mark, look, Lily said, pointing to a dusty, old key tucked beneath one of the toys. My breath hitched as I rushed toward it, heart pounding. If we could find a door to escape. But the moment I reached for the key, the child lunged forward, blocking my path. No! It's not time for that yet! His voice rose, sharp with a dark command. The shadows surged, swirling around us like a storm. I felt the temperature drop, a lump of icy dread forming in my stomach. The giggles morphed into shrill laughter, closing in like a storm. Lily, keep moving! Back away! I shouted, dragging her toward the opposite end of the room, but the child raised a hand, and suddenly, we were shoved back, colliding with the table. Toys clattered to the floor, and the sound echoed across the oppressive silence. Just then, the light flickered violently. I could feel a presence shifting in the room, growing stronger. I glanced at Lily, fear mirrored in her wide eyes. What do we do? She whispered desperately. I spotted the door behind the child, still ajar but shrouded in shadow. It beckoned like a lifeline. We have to distract him, I urged. Grab something! Lily yelled, her voice finding strength. It was a plan, albeit reckless. I lunged for a toy from the table, an old stuffed bear. I hurled it at the child with all my might. Time to play! He shrieked, dodging the bear but distracted if only for a moment. Run! I shouted, pushing Lily toward the door. We barreled toward it, stumbling as the shadows receded slightly, almost as if they were letting us go. I reached for the knob, heart racing. That's when I heard it, a piercing scream from behind us. I turned just in time to see the shadows twist into terrifying shapes, the child's laughter morphing into furious shrieks. You can't escape! He howled, anger rippling through the air. With a surge of adrenaline, I ripped the door open and pulled Lily through, crashing into another corridor. But the darkness didn't dissipate. It slithered after us, hungry and relentless. Mark, what just happened? Lily gasped, her breath coming in quick bursts. I shook my head, still processing. I don't know, but we can't stop. We have to find a way out of this place. But as we stumbled forward, another sound crept into my ears. A whisper, soft but growing louder. It promised secrets, yet with a heavy weight of dread. And I realized this wasn't over. Not yet. The hallway stretched before us, dark and oppressive. Even the faint light from the ceiling flickered, as if it too feared the shadows. I could feel their presence creeping closer, coiling around us like smoke. Lily's hand trembled in mine, and I could tell she was on the verge of breaking down. Where do we go now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I squinted into the darkness, trying to make out any markings on the walls. We need to find stairs or a window, anything, I said, heart racing. We couldn't linger. We had to keep moving. Suddenly the whisper grew clearer, morphing into fragmented words I could almost understand. Come back. Stay with us. Did you hear that? I asked, stopping in my tracks. Goosebumps erupted on my arms. I was almost afraid to respond. Lily nodded, her face pale. "It sounded like it wants us to go back," she said, but there was a thrill of fear in her voice. Before I could answer, a sudden crash echoed from somewhere down the hallway. The sound sent us both jumping back, instincts urging us to flee in the opposite direction. "Let's go now," I urged, pulling her along. But the whispers escalated into frantic pleas, begging us to return. "Don't leave us!" they cried. "Mark! What if it's the child?" Lily's eyes widened as she gripped my arm tighter. Those thoughts flooded my mind. Was the child we encountered gone, or was he still waiting for us? My gut twisted in response. I had to focus. As we turned the corner, we saw a door partially ajar at the end of the hallway. It looked different, old and worn, the metal handle twisted and rusty. There was a faint light spilling from within, almost inviting. "Should we check it out?" Lily asked, glancing back nervously. I hesitated. It could be a trap. We can't let our guard down. But there was something about that light, something that coaxed me closer. Just a quick look, I decided. I pushed the door open slowly, the creaking sound echoing through the empty space. Inside was a dim room filled with old hospital equipment. Shadows danced against the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes. On one side, a grimy window revealed the night sky, starless and oppressive. In the corner, there sat a small, dusty table. Laying atop it was a photograph, framed and cracked. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I stepped forward. I felt the air grow colder as I approached, the whispers now more urgent. "Mark!" Lily's voice pierced through my distraction. I glanced back, but before I could answer, the lights flickered again, making the shadows lurch toward me. I snatched the photograph and held it up to the light. It was a family, smiling faces frozen in time. But in the background stood a shadowy figure, its eyes glowing faintly. My heart raced as realization crashed over me like an icy wave. That figure looked hauntingly familiar. It was the same child, the same wicked grin etched into his face, but older. This wasn't just some twisted memory. It was a warning, our connection to all of this. Then, everything went dark. The light sputtered out, leaving us enveloped in complete blackness. "Mark!" Lily shouted, panic lacing her voice. "Stay close," I said, holding out my hand as I felt the temperature drop drastically. A new, heavy presence filled the room. As the darkness constricted around us, I noticed something slithering just at my feet. Something that felt alive, and it was coming for us. "I found something, but we have to go now," I shouted. But doubt gnawed at my heart. Whatever was whispering in the shadows wanted us to stay. And as it grew closer, I realized the game had just begun. The darkness felt endless, thick and suffocating around us. I prayed the photographs hadn't been a trap, but a light to guide us home. "The shadows feel different now," I whispered to Lily, just barely steadying my voice against the cacophony of whispers that rose and fell like a haunting melody. "Mark, we need to get out of here," she urged, her breath quickening as she clutched my arm tighter. I could feel the swirling mass of shadows intensifying, almost pulsing in rhythm with our racing hearts. "Where do we go?" she asked, her voice threaded with fear. "Remember the truck?" I replied, snapping back to the image of the toy that had brought everything crashing down. It was a connection to all this madness. Maybe we can find it again. But as we moved, the shadows shifted, snaking around us, the whispers morphing into fearful howls. "Come back. Stay with us," they pleaded, wrapping around me, trying to tug me into their embrace. I shook my head, refusing to give in. Their words were like chains, threatening to pull me back into the depths. "Focus! We can't listen to them!" I shouted, reigniting my battle against the encroaching darkness. I could barely see Lily, her pale outline swallowed by the heavy veil around us. Our connection was all that kept me grounded as we stumbled forward. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. I could feel the weight of distorted visions pressing against my mind, shadows tugging at my consciousness. Then a flicker of light broke through. "There!" I pointed to another doorway, barely visible through the swirling abyss. With every ounce of strength, I pulled Lily through the doorway. The moment we crossed the threshold, everything shifted. We tumbled into a room filled with deep blue light, unlike anything I'd seen in the hospital. I took a moment to regain my bearings. The air felt electric, vibrant, yet eerily calm. Around us were more toys, but they were all lit, shimmering as if waiting. The walls were adorned with whimsical paintings of children playing, their faces bright and joyful. But something in my stomach twisted as I scanned the corners. The shadows attempted to seep in but recoiled from the light, causing them to shimmer and fade in the glow surrounding us. "Maybe we can find the truck here," I said, sensing hope. "Let's look." We divided to scour the room, heartbeats racing. Every second felt like an eternity as I rifled through old stuffed animals and shiny trinkets, whispering quiet encouragements to myself. In the corner, I spotted it, the toy truck, remarkably unscathed and shining. I reached for it, but as I did, the laughter erupted again. This time, it was louder, disturbing. It echoed through the room like waves against rock, deepening with an otherworldly quality. "Mark!" Lily shouted. I looked at her, just in time to see her face drain of color as the shadows began pouring back in, growing darker and angrier, drawn towards the glow of the toys. "We have to go now!" she cried, visioning the chaos surging to reclaim its dominion. I snatched the truck, and in that split second, the room distorted. Light flickered violently, the paintings turning dark, the once joyous children's faces transformed into twisted masks of despair. I froze, holding the truck, my heart racing. "Mark!" Lily's scream pierced through. I turned to see the dark figures converging, creeping slowly, hungry for us. Without thinking, I shouted, "I believe in you! This is ours!" The moment the words escaped my lips, a surge of energy ignited from the truck. The light exploded outward, pushing the shadows back, engulfing the figures in a brilliant dance of illumination. "Now!" I called to Lily, grabbing her hand and darting toward the only visible exit. The light began fading as shadows clawed desperately at its edges, striving to absorb us once more. We burst through the doorway just as the light dimmed to a flicker, and suddenly, it was calm. We stumbled into a familiar corridor, the children's ward. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above, and everything felt unsettlingly quiet. The air had thickened with an unshakable tension. But we had escaped, hadn't we? I looked at Lily, breathless and terrified. Did we make it?" "I don't know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She scanned the corridor, and I noticed how her hands trembled. The moment lingered until we heard it. Faint laughter echoing down the hall, a sinister sound that shook us both to our core. And though the shadows had receded, I felt their presence still lingering, hiding in the corners of our minds. I moved to a different city after that, I found myself reflecting later. Sometimes I wonder if those things still exist within the walls of that hospital, if the games are played anew, but mostly, I try not to think about it. Would there be another night shift, another witness to the whispers and shadows? Or were they just figments of my imagination, nightmares blended into reality? I wouldn't return to find out,